I used to work nights at a small roadside hotel. It has been about a year since this happened. But even now, when I think about that shift, my stomach tightens. I still do not know what that man wanted, and that is the part that unsettles me most. The hotel itself was nothing special. It had 3 floors, around 40 rooms, and mostly served drivers who were too tired to keep going. On weeknights, maybe 10 or 15 rooms were occupied at most. My shift was always the same, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Nights were usually slow and quiet. I sat behind the front desk doing paperwork, checking the cameras, and sometimes watching videos on my phone just to stay awake. The lobby was small and plain. There was a front desk, a couple of old couches against the wall, a TV that was rarely on, and 2 vending machines glowing softly in the corner. Behind the desk was a tiny office with a computer, a chair, and a glass window that allowed me to see the lobby while I sat inside. After midnight, the entrance doors locked automatically, so anyone who arrived late had to press a buzzer before I could let them inside. Most nights after midnight were completely uneventful. Maybe one late check-in, but nothing serious ever happened. That night started out no differently. Around 11 p.m., the buzzer sounded. I checked the camera and saw a man standing outside the door. I pressed the button to unlock it, and he walked inside. He came toward the desk calmly. He looked to be in his mid-40s, tall, a little thin, wearing jeans, a jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low. He carried a backpack over one shoulder. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about him, but something about his face felt empty, like there was no emotion behind it. He asked for a room for the night. I told him the price, and he nodded without saying anything else. He handed me a card. I swiped it. The machine beeped like it always did when a payment went through. Everything seemed normal. I encoded a key card and gave him his room number on the 2nd floor. Instead of leaving right away, he stood there and stared at me. It was not aggressive or friendly. It was just a silent, uncomfortable stare that lasted a few seconds too long. Then, without saying a word, he turned and walked toward the elevator. I tried not to think about it too much. People act strange late at night, especially when they are tired. I went back to scrolling on my phone and let time pass. Around midnight, I looked up from behind the desk and noticed he was back. He walked past the front desk without stopping and sat down on one of the lounge areas. The TV was off, but he sat facing it as if something were playing. At first, I assumed he couldn't sleep. Sometimes guests wandered into the lobby for no reason. But after 30 minutes, it started to feel wrong. He hadn't moved at all. He was not looking at a phone, reading, or resting. He was simply staring at the blank screen. When I stood up to get a bottle of water from the vending machines, I felt his eyes move to me. I did not look at him directly, but the feeling of being watched never left as I walked there and back. My skin crawled as I returned behind the front desk. Around 1 a.m., I opened the reservation system out of boredom. When I checked the occupied rooms, something immediately looked wrong. The room I had just assigned him was listed as empty. I refreshed the page and checked again. It still showed the room as vacant. I searched the check-in history and couldn't find his name anywhere. Then I checked the transaction records. There was no payment from his card at all. Now I felt uneasy. I knew I had swiped his card. I remembered the sound the machine made. I picked up the phone and called the room number I had assigned him anyway. The phone rang over and over, but no one answered. I then checked the door entry history for the room. Each door recorded every card swipe. There was no activity at all. The door had not been opened once that night. That is when it hit me. He never even went to the room. I looked at the lobby again. He was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen. There was absolutely no record of him being a guest. My chest felt tight as I sat there trying to make sense of it. I waited another 15 minutes, watching the monitor. Finally, I worked up the courage to approach him. I asked if everything was okay. He slowly turned his head toward me. His face showed no emotion at all. "I just can't sleep," he said. Then he turned back to face the TV. I nodded and returned to the desk, but my hands were shaking. Around 2 a.m., I noticed he was no longer in the lounge. My heart dropped. I scanned the camera feeds and found him standing at the end of a hallway near the bathrooms. He stood in a shadow where the light barely reached. He wasn't moving. He wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there. After several minutes, he turned and walked back toward the lobby. A short while later, he was sitting on the couch again, as if nothing had happened. I went into the back office and called my manager. I explained everything to her. She sounded tired and told me to keep watching him and call the police if he did anything threatening. I remember thinking that it already felt threatening, but I didn't argue. After that, I began watching the cameras constantly. I saw him walking slowly down hallways, stopping at the very end and standing still again. Later, he entered the stairwell and remained there for several minutes. Every time I looked up, he was somewhere else. Sometimes near the elevators, sometimes by the vending machines, sometimes standing in dark corners. By 3:30 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I called the non-emergency police line and told them there was a man inside the hotel who did not appear to be a guest. While I waited, he moved again. This time, he came closer to the desk. He stood only about 15 feet away from me and stared. He did not speak. He barely blinked. I pretended to type on the computer, but my breathing was shallow and uneven. Around 3:50 a.m., the buzzer went off again. I hoped it was the police, but it was only another guest returning late. As I let them in, I saw the man turn his head and follow the guest with his eyes until they disappeared down the hallway. A few minutes later, I noticed he was gone again. I checked the cameras and saw him standing outside another guest's door on the first floor. He was not knocking. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there. I immediately called 911. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way and to stay where I was. I stared at the monitor as he stood motionless outside that door for several minutes. Then he finally walked back toward the lobby. When he returned, he walked straight up to the front desk and leaned slightly forward. He asked, "Is there any food?" quietly. I pointed toward the vending machines and told him that was all we had. He gave a small smile and walked away. A few minutes later, police arrived. I unlocked the doors and pointed straight at him. He was sitting in the lounge again, as if nothing had happened. They questioned him and asked for his ID. After a few minutes, they escorted him out of the building. One of the officers returned to speak with me. He told me the man was not a guest. The card he had used was stolen. He had no reservation and no luggage. He had pretended to rent a room just to gain access to the building. After they left, I sat behind the desk shaking until my shift ended. Every time I looked at the monitors, I expected to see him again. What haunts me the most is knowing how long he was inside. He wandered the hotel for hours, stood outside guest rooms and watched me from dark corners. And the entire time, he was never supposed to be there. I still don't know what he planned to do. But I know it was not anything good.